Hello, everybody. Today, I think I'm gonna talk about the RCF itself. Um, I spoke about the history of F in the last episode on the origins. This time, I'm gonna focus more on the RCF itself, some technical data, some actually facts about the design and development of the RCF, and what was the design philosophy behind it, and what are all my research and reading all the documentation, what did I really find about, and also it's corroborated by my experience of driving the RCF, how it actually kind of lines up with what my personal experience over the last 7.5 years is, and what are some of the really key features, and what are some of the key factors, and even limitations that the design and the development process had. So I think I'll probably start a little bit with where we left off the last time. The ISF was built in 2007 to compete with the E92 M3, the E90 M3 sedan, more precisely, and then also the C63 AMG at that time, the W204, the one with the 6.2 liter V8, 440 horsepower or something like that. So the ISF made about 416, and then the M3 made 414, and then the C63 was about 440, 445 or something. So they were that was like sort of like the golden era for the V8s, basically, in this segment of the high performance luxury compact sports cars. So they were a mix of everything, practicality, comfort, and then ability to take them, spirited driving, and then have the V8 soundtrack and experience. And there was also the Audi RS4, which was known as the B7 RS4. So there were these four V8 cars that were back in 2007 through 2013, 2014. They were all competing with each other. So it was like really the golden era for the V8s at that point. And the strategy began to change, for much of the industry in this segment, and they started to go turbocharging, downsizing, smaller displacement engines, going with twin turbo engines. So I believe this is where obviously LFA was also another factor that had already been around for a few years. The initial response to LFA was pretty mixed. Of course, once it went out of production, it started to really get appreciated a lot more. But being somebody who was really in the middle of this, where I used to be an avid enthusiast for the LFA, who used to defend the LFA on, in the forums about how it stacked up against the competitors like the 458 Italia, and the Nissan GTR, the Lamborghini Gallardo LP564 or the LP574, and these were some of the key. The Audi R8 and the V10, that was another one. So I used to kind of really be the staunch defender for the LFA, because for me it was like it was the ultimate supercar at that point, and mostly because of the engine. There was nothing at that point that was capable of revving up to 9,000 RPM. Of course, the 458 Italia came out at the same time as well, and it had a 9,000 RPM redline, just like the LFA. But for me, because of the Japanese angle to this, I was really, really drawn to the LFA and the V10 and the sound of it. Of course, somebody could say that, yeah, the Honda S2000 had it like in 2000. Which is true, in that it was developed in the late 90s, so it had a 9,000 RPM. But in order to get like a little bit understanding of this, the difference between the two, I have to get a little bit into the engineering aspect of it. That when you have a 2-liter or 2-liter 4-cylinder versus something like as a 4.8 liter V10, the centrifugal forces that are exerted on the internal rotating mass of the engine is completely different. So if you cannot compare a 2-liter engine revving to 9,000 RPM with a 4.8 liter V10 revving to 9,000 RPM. It's a completely different dynamic because there's so much more inertia and forces because of the additional mass, because the larger displacement that it brings, and the faster it rotates, the more inertia it's dealing with. So it's a far bigger difficult feat for the LFA to have that capability to rev to 9,000 RPM. Anyway, so that was the era at that point. So once the production of ISF was slated to be ended in 2014, I believe in 2012 was when they really started to plan out the next F car, when LFA was there, and then ISF was also in production. At that time, the third generation IS had come out, and the fourth generation GS was also around at that point. So the chief engineer was the same who actually designed and developed the ISF. He was given the task now with a much bigger budget to create another successor to the ISF. The first time the budget was limited, and the car that they had to use was basically the base IS chassis that came out a few years before that. But this time the approach was a little bit different. Then they were starting out the planning of the RCF right at the time when the car was being developed. So the RCF, and then we'll talk about the RCF GT3 as well, the racing car, they were all developed at the same time. And I've read that there was a time when they were putting the three chassis side by side with each other in order to really kind of share some of the components and to take some of the development, because the RCF GT3 was going to be an homologation. Essentially, it had to be something that's a lot of it comes from a road car, which is this RCF here. So the homologation really makes sure that there's fair competition, that the companies are not really going out and creating something really so crazy that you can't really mass produce it. So the homologation makes sure that a lot of the car is taken from a mass produced car. So the RCF was the mass produced car, and then some of the components that are the base for the RCF GT3 come from the RCF. But of course the RCF GT3 has been modified pretty extensively to become a proper racing car, as is the case with every other racing car. So of course there's the successor that is going to be with the RCF GT3, and that's a separate topic, which is going to be the GR GT3, and that's a different approach, and we'll probably talk about that at that point. So the idea was that they were going to take a base car and then develop the RCF right at the time with the base car as well. So the RC 350, RC 300, and RC 200T, they were all developed at the same time. It really benefited some of the things that the base RC got because of the RCF as well, and we'll kind of get into those as well. So I think the first thing was that there were quite a few things that I read. Yakihiko Yaguchi had said that he wanted to do differently than when he built the ISF. So one was that he wanted to have a base car that is actually has a chassis that is developed at the same time as the RCF as well, not something that they take existing off the shelf and then try to shoehorn something into there to make a high performance car. So in 2012 they were developing the cars, and they were revealed at the same time in 2014 as well, RCF and the RC 350 at the same time in the Detroit Auto Show. So the philosophy was that they were going to build a chassis, and then that chassis was going to be a high performance chassis that could really stand up to the rigors of track use. Now Lexus makes really good chassis. The GS was there, the IS was there. What I read was that the chief engineer said that he was looking for very high rigidity tolerances for the car. So the 3IS chassis at that point, they could have made a coupe out of it. It was entirely possible. It's very just like the BMW M3 and M4, they share the same chassis as they do with the base 3 Series. But the reason why they did not pick the 3IS chassis was because it just did not have the rigidity. There was quite a lot of flex, and and it's something that I'll probably talk more about because I own both platforms. So I own the RCF and I also own the IS chassis as well. So I kind of know the difference on the same exact surfaces, how the two cars behave. So I think probably it's more of a topic for that point. So they wanted to build something that they could actually use, that is a high performance chassis that could do well on the racetrack with a high level of rigidity built into it. The budget was pretty big, because there were 2 years of development that took from RCF from 2012 to 2014. And there was like I don't know, thousands of miles of laps around the racetrack of the prototypes. So what they did was that they were like, we can't build a platform from the beginning, because there was a lot of things that were developed for the RCF. The engine, the transmission, the differential, and then suspension components. So there was a lot of things that they had to build. They just didn't have the budget to actually go and create something brand new from scratch. So what they did was that they were like, we could actually go and take some of the existing components and design a chassis from that. So what they did was that there were a few key requirements that they wanted to fulfill. So the first one is going to be that the front track needed to be pretty wide, right? So that means it's going to be wider than the IS, right? The second thing was that it had to have a very rigid core. So the rigid core means this whole section here needs to be very stiff, because this is the section that really joins the front section to the rear section. So the middle section here is the one that is suspended in the air, that is joining the front tires to the rear tires. So this is the part that needs to have the highest rigidity. And then it needed to be short. It could not have been a really long overhang, right? So then that was another requirement. So what they did was that they actually took the platform, and then they took the front section of the 4GS, and essentially they fortified this whole firewall here that's called the apron. So it's really, really strong. This whole thing has been really thickened here. And then they put I'll show the engine bay. They got chassis braces, and then there are braces underneath as well. So they put really a lot of bracing everywhere, and the wider front section gave it wider axle, and then ability to put wide tires and wide wheels. So that's one of the things that were brought over the IS. So the next one was this middle section here. This middle section here is very stiff, and the reason for that is that this floor pan here has I'll put the diagram up of the whole architecture. There are cross members running across this whole chassis, and this floor pan here is almost twice as thick. So this one was taken from a convertible, which was designed to be stiff without a roof, whereas this one has a roof, right? So there's a big difference there. And then if you see the size of this whole structure that we have here in the door sill, there are essentially beams running across, and this whole thing is it's really thick. If you look at it from here to here, there's almost like a foot distance between where the seat is and where the outer edge of the sill is. And then there's also, this door is very heavy. It's one of the reasons why the car is pretty heavy. Like, this door is very heavy because there are bars that are running across from here that is essentially giving strength and then torsional rigidity from here to here. So what that really means is that when the car is under hard braking and you're really braking and really pivoting on this whole part is really resisting any kind of flex. So this thing would really make sure that the front end and it doesn't start to squish under really high G-force braking. And then this rear end has the IS, the third, the one that I own. The section of that one comes from here, but the subframe is entirely unique to the RCF. The rear subframe is entirely, it's not even shared with the base RC. Sorry, the base RC has a different rear subframe. The front subframe is actually shared with the fourth GS, fourth generation GS. So and then the rear subframe, it's a lot more thicker and heavier than, if you look at all the joints and all the welds that you see, if you kind of put that look at all the mounting points, you will see there's a lot of really thick. So this subframe would never crack under, even if you're doing crazy drifts. It's something that I'm pointing out that is very common thing known in the BMW world, where the E46 and E92 M3s, they have both had a really infamous issue of the rear subframes cracking at high mileage. So they start to really crack because they're just not strong enough to really resist fatigue, so they start to crack. So no such issue here. This thing is going to build to like last 300,000 kilometers. The subframe is extremely stiff. And another thing that probably a lot of people don't really know is that if you uncover this whole thing, you can see there's no full rear folding seats here. There's only a pass-through in the middle. I'll show you the pass-through. And there's actually a 10-point chassis brace in there. So it's like a metal, it's like a steel, solid steel. I don't believe it's lightweight aluminum. It's steel, so it's pretty heavy, right? And it's a 10-point chassis brace that essentially has mounting points on the left side and at the bottom all across the whole chassis. So it really, what that is really doing is that it's really giving it rigidity is both torsional and longitudinal. So you could have flex happening along the length of the car and also the width of the car. So it could be twisting that way, or it could be twisting this way like this, or it could be twisting like this. So you need to have stiffness both ways, right? So this chassis is very stiff and you really feel it. And I think you go over bumps, especially in the setup that I have, and my car is pretty much stock in terms of suspension. I have very little, and I'll talk about that. I have very good tires, way better than the ones that it came with. And that's one of the really big weak points of this car, the tires that it came with. And I'll explain why that is. So it's like you really feel that.